Continuing education knows that at the end of the day, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we really listen to their needs, and we can offer them flexible options both within continuing education and across the campus.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Thank you all for joining us at the 78th Annual Conference on World Affairs. My name is Benjamin South. I'm a doctoral candidate in the College of Music here, and I'll be serving as today's moderator. For recording purposes, this is the panel Pop Girlies Are Singing What Gen Z Is Feeling, Tuesday, April 14th at 2 p.m. Now, before I get started, I'd like to read the University of Colorado's land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of the indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, and supporting student success and integrating indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Thank you. Once again, welcome to CWA and today's discussion. We ask that all our attendees remain respectful throughout the discussion and refrain from interruptions. Signs, banners, noisemakers, and other audible disruptions are not permitted and will result in those responsible being asked to leave the room. Time will be allotted for questions from our in-person audience here today. We will take your questions via handwritten note cards. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and a producer, one of our lovely individuals in the back, will take a note card and pencil and bring it to me. Please print legibly and raise your hand. And now I would like to introduce our panel today. First up, on my far right, we have Lisa Graves. Lisa Graves is the Executive Director of True North Research, co-founder of Court Accountability, and one of the country's sharpest analysts in constitutional law and Supreme Court politics. Her new book examines how Chief Justice Roberts and his allies have reshaped American rights from the bench. A returning CWA favorite, Lisa also has something perhaps unexpected to say about music, how music can change the world. And we can't wait to hear it.
That was lovely, and also that's the only time I've ever been on the far right.
Oh, I see that.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Asher J will be joining us shortly. Asher J is a National Geographic explorer, system thinker, writer, and chief network architect of the Shareholder Democracy Network, whose work connects interhuman misalignment to the larger crises playing out in our ecosystems, economies, and institutions. A returning CWA panelist as well, she joins this panel to explore a dimension of music that goes far beyond the stage. How pop culture may shape fashion, amplifies issues like climate and conservation, and mobilizes collective awareness. And finally, Tai Tashiro. Tai Tashiro is an NYC-based psychologist, author, and CU Boulder alumnus whose work uses social science to illuminate the quirks of human behavior, from why we make baffling choices in love to why social awkwardness can be a superpower. He is also the reason we're discussing this topic today, because this panel was his idea. Tai, what made you want to bring this panel to the...
Okay, I got us into this mess. So you have to help me, please, today, make this all work. This is the one I'm most excited. You're not supposed to have favorites, but this is the one I am looking the most forward to. So thanks for being good sports here. But we'll have to have some teamwork to make this work. I think it'll be really cool if you can all get on board with me. So will you just give me a nod of your head if you're into being with the teamwork? Awesome. I love pop music. I have the musical taste of a 14-year-old boy, probably. And I thought the past 2 or 3 years actually, have been amazing for pop music. And to me, there hasn't been a couple-year span where the music has captured the zeitgeist of a generation so well. And to me, I think the pop music right now captures the zeitgeist for Gen Z in some very important ways that can help for those of us who aren't Gen Z gain a deeper understanding and empathy. And for those of us who are Gen Z, hopefully makes you feel a little more understood and seen. So music, of course, is a great way to do this. So what we're going to do to start, and everyone's been a good sport about let me do this here. Who in here has like Spotify or iTunes and a working phone speaker? Okay, keep your hand up, please, if you will. Now look around and see people who don't have their hand up. If you are someone with your hand up, please be assertive and friendly about finding someone who doesn't have their phone with them and their iTunes or their Spotify, because we'll need to do the cute Gen Z thing where we put the phone between your 2 ears when you sit together and you'll listen to the song together, okay? Now, even if you do have a phone, please, when we get started, slide towards your neighbor in your row and listen to the song together so we can turn this into a little more of a communal kind of experience, okay? So can we put our introversion aside, all right, and slide next to your person, okay? We're doing it. I like it. Okay. Now, so whoever's in charge of the music, the first song we're going to do, I'll give you the song. Just search for it. Pull it up. It's going to be a little cacophonous, so put it close to your ears. And play the song. I'll give you about 2 minutes to listen to a snippet from the song. And then we'll come back together. All right? The first song is Chapel Roan. I would enter Good Luck Babe. Okay, Good Luck Babe's a little bit easier. So find Good Luck Babe. You have about 2 minutes, and I'll bring you back together when we'll go to the next thing. Okay, go ahead. Okay, why don't we go ahead and I think you all made it to the second chorus. Sorry to interrupt. What a great chorus, isn't it? Isn't that fun? I'm not going to go into it too much. We'll get into this more as we discuss this. But the idea here is that we'll point out a few lyrics, and then we'll talk about the broader social themes maybe some of this stuff captures. My favorite line in this is the opening line. It's fine. It's cool. What a great, in fact, I will tell you, when I give talks now, that's my little mantra before I go out. It's fine. It's cool. Now, how many times, if you're not Gen Z, have you talked to a Gen Z person who kind of speaks in that tone? It's fine. It's cool, right? Even the Gen Z stare that they get hell for sometimes, it's kind of like it's fine. It's cool. So much of the music, pop music now is about a vibe, So even if it might be, seem simplistic, there's an emotional tone to it that I think is very consistent. She has some other great lyrics in here. And I guess I'm the fool with her arms out like an angel through the car sunroof. What a great image. There's another line she comes back to later in the second verse. I'm cliche, who cares? It's a sexually explicit kind of love affair. And I cry, it's not fair. I just need a little lovin'. I just need a little air. So almost any Chapel Roan song you get off her latest album, there is this intense, burning desire, right? And it might be romantic, it might be sexual sometimes, but really, to me, it seems like just an intense, burning desire to feel and being thwarted at every turn by society, okay? So that's Chapel Roan. Do y'all enjoy that? Okay, great. Let's go to the second song. Now, this is not as cheery. This one is Party for You, Charlie XCX. Party for You, Charlie XCX. And go ahead and listen to about, a minute or two of that, and I'll bring you back all together, okay?
I think I'm
Okay, I think everyone made it to that amazing bridge, right? So that's a little more moody. One of the reasons that I think this song's a good one to choose is that Charlie XCX wrote this during the pandemic, during lockdown. And this is, of course, a very pivotal event for all of us, but especially, what if you're 16, 17 years old, and that's what you're going through? It's a huge impact on your life. I think it's a huge point of empathy for someone who's not Gen Z to think about if I were 16 or 17 and going through that, what would that have been like, right? And one of the things you get in the song is, it's just heartbreaking if you really listen to it. I'd encourage you to go back and listen to some of these and just really get into it. I was hoping you would come through is a line that happens again and again in that song, right? And a little bit later, once again, it's the same thing with the Chapel Roan theme we saw, where there was this intense desire, this intense yearning for something. And once again, society or circumstances are thwarting someone's ability to achieve that, right? There's these couple lines: if you saw my tears, would you touch me? Kiss me on the mouth, say you love me. Leave a message, tell me you're sorry. What a beautiful series of lines about what you really want as far as human connection and feeling. But once again, you can't have it, right? Let's do one more song. Now, this one is a banger, okay? And this is Ray, R-A-Y-E. I love the title of this. It's all caps with an exclamation point. Where is my husband? Very declarative. So why don't you find Where is my husband? Go ahead and give that a listen, and then we'll get back together. All right, you probably get the point at this point already. Ray's not messing around, right? One of the reasons I love this song is, unlike a bit of the Chapel Roan, unlike the Charlie XCX, here you have someone who's just had it. And she's like, I'm not waiting around. Where the hell is my husband? And demanding from the world, right? Exercising her agency in such a way that she's going to impose herself upon the world. I think the energy in that song is amazing. I think it picks up an amazing theme, and a theme I think that's been emerging more recently in pop music, especially among female artists, which I think is really cool. So anyways, I'm going to shut up here in a second, but those are the three songs. So Chapel Roan, intense desire and yearning, but thwarted at every turn. Charlie XCX, written in the pandemic. Once again, that song, you've all done this probably. Did you ever throw a party just hoping one person would show up? Yeah. And it's getting later. You're like, where the hell is this? Getting sadder, spiraling downward. That's what that song's about. But, once again, yearning for something and aching. That's more of an aching, but not being able to have it fulfilled. Finally, we have Ray. Where the hell is my husband? Just putting her foot down and imposing herself upon the world. So thank you all for being good sports about that and for helping us make this a good panel. Thank you.
So, Lisa, Asher, do you have any thoughts on this?
You want to go first?
Sure. I just came panting. Yeah. Do I need to press it the whole time? Okay. So I realized, one, that I don't listen to as much traditional pop music, but I do love Iniko. I don't know if you guys know of that artist, indie pop, and the same thing for Paris Paloma. So I do think there are artists who are singing more from a deeper awareness, wanting to take a greater sense of sovereignty, autonomy, not being as defined by the external variables, willing to ask the difficult questions, and do it in an upbeat, uplifting way, right? And set it to a good beat. So I think, yes, there is a lot. I mean, from when I was looking at Billie Eilish, and some of that music doesn't resonate with me because that's not the vibe I live at. And so I prefer more upbeat music. And the more I looked at pop icons that a lot of people really enjoyed, part of the reason they have this massive draw is there is a lot of heavy themes, a lot of darkness, especially in early Billie Eilish work, and also looking at things that maybe previously we wouldn't have been as stark. I remember growing up, the kind of pop music I was exposed to was a little bit more frivolous, right? I think we're more hard-hitting in our willingness to be vulnerable and lean into like anxiety, emotional unrest, into aspects within identity that we're challenged by. So that's a good thing in some ways. I do think it's important that we're able to articulate why we're suffering. But from there, I don't see enough being shown in the way of how to get past that suffering, how do we navigate through it, and how do we actually attain a space where we're not constantly feeling challenged, where we're not constantly in the survival mode. And it would be lovely to see more musical artifacts being created that would allow for that level of joy and like collective, communal connectivity that is otherwise missing. And I think part of that is emergent from the level of technology that is between people, right? So like most of my friends' kids, when I see them, they're barely ever talking to us. They're always on their phones, and you have to have screen cutoff times. And then you see them engaging through whatever media conduits that their parents have made available to them. And so it's not direct engagement. It's not actually spending time with your friends. It's more through the screen. And the same thing with dating. I think the prevalence of desire being expressed, so much yearning being put into the musical lyric is partly because there's such a prevalence of ghosting, just absenteeism. Like people are not present for one another. Everyone thinks everyone is replaceable. And so we just go in and swipe towards the next better thing. And so everyone feels disposable. And so then what is your self-worth coming from? Where is your self-esteem anchored? And then what are we then singing about, right? What are we empowering into that space of feeling worthiness? And then does that draw in a partner do you need that recognition coming from the outside in? Or can you have that and then expect that reciprocity where you're able to give that to another, but like it's not coming from a place of deficit? But I don't think those narratives are being explored or connected through. There's no through line. And so there are these like fragments where you're seeing people express the anguish, but you don't really see sort of the narrative arc of, okay, we've seen all of the dots now, and now here's how the dots are connecting. Now let's make sense of the whole picture, right? And I think understanding that landscape and giving it context would probably be like music that would help the Gen Z not feel as displaced within themselves and in their circles of belonging. But I don't think that that's happening as much in pop culture or in mainstream media for that matter. Every time I see TV, I get kind of depressed. Sorry. Yeah.
So I have a confession to make. When I saw that I was on this panel, I thought, my moisturizer must really be working. It's like, how am I on a Gen Z panel? And in my household with my husband, I often say to him, I don't feel as old as I am. And then he says to me, just keep telling yourself that, baby. So, but I did, I'm so glad to learn the origin of this panel, Ty, because I did recommend a panel on music as a pathway for, freedom and joy. And I had to go and check, like, how much Gen Z music do I really know? Okay, I have another confession. I had to look up, like, what is Gen Z? I was like, what is the age range? Okay, 2002 to 2012. Okay, I got it. So that means that the youngest or the oldest Gen Z person would be 24 now, and the youngest Gen Z person would be 14 now. And then I realized that my moisturizer would do nothing for this occasion. But I do love music, and so I have two columns here on my notebook. One is the music that is not from Gen Z that inspires me, because I had to start from knowledge or self-knowledge. But then I did go through and think through some of the music of Gen Z or of this moment, in this time frame that really has resonated with me. And I have to say, let me just start with Bad Bunny. Wow. Now, I confess that I was not like a Bad Bunny super fan before he won the Grammys, like this massive win, but I had like heard some song. And then when Trump hated him, I was like, I gotta love this guy. Clearly, Bad Bunny and I have a connection that I don't even know exists. And his Super Bowl performance was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was a radical, but amazing and beautiful and heartfelt rejection of the division in our society. It was so mesmerizing and beautiful, and the melody of the different songs that he put together, and the display of family and connection in the aftermath of a year of splintering and attack and decimation was one of the most profound protests seen around the world that I think has ever been aired, and it aired in musical form. So, wow, Bad Bunny. Okay. Then my next, this is all stream of consciousness, so I'm just going to go through with you. Bear with me. The next song that I think does capture both this period and also this sort of reckoning of Me Too and the Women's March and more over these past several decades is Olivia Rodrigo's Vampire. When I heard that on the radio, because I do listen to the radio, not just XM, but because I want to make sure that I'm, hip to the extent possible. So I'm driving down the highway and Vampire comes on, and I literally pulled off the highway to stop and listen to it. It was such a rebuke of a man who had taken advantage of this young woman, and it was such a great protest song against patriarchy, against toxic masculinity. It effing rocks. If you haven't heard it, Olivia Rodrigo's Vampire, amazing. Billie Eilish, amazing. Sia, Unstoppable, wow, also super inspiring. Then there was a throwback, so this is not quite, it is Gen Z in the sense that it's a music that came out after this period, which was, I'm gonna confess, YG FDT, which means FDT. I'm sure you've seen flags around the country saying FJB. This was a precursor to that. I can't recommend that in a workplace or classroom setting, just for the record. And I also think emerging out of the protests in Minnesota, so in this era, not by Gen Z, but we had Heidi Wilson and Hold On, that beautiful song, the sing-along from Minneapolis, just a slow song, not in the same vein as the pop Girlies, but just a fantastic, amazing song. And then I've got some more to say, but I will wrap this part up by saying, there's a lot of ways in which pop culture has been responding to this moment. There are people who have a lot to risk by speaking out. Charles Barkley, man. He spoke up about immigration. That was a brave act in a setting in which politics is typically not discussed. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the amazing Jesse Wells. You may have seen him on The Tonight Show. He's the guy with the guitar who's singing these amazing original songs, including Join Ice. If you haven't read the lyrics or listened to the song, it is fantastic. He is a true talent. I'm not going to say he's the Bob Dylan of the Gen Z generation because, I have views on Bob Dylan. Like some of his music, basically love everything Jesse Wells has done. So, not a pop girly, so I broke the rule of the title of the panel, but on the kind of transcending the circumstances, someone who's writing really current lyrics about our current time, I would recommend Jesse Wells. I didn't get to my right semicolon. I'll get to that later.
Thank you, Lisa. So I actually have a question for you guys. Ty, you and I briefly talked about this in the room earlier. Can we talk a little bit about what a pop girly actually is? Can we define that? Is this limited to American women or American femme-identifying individuals who are making music? Or does it go to K-pop? Does it go to male artists like Lisa was saying? Let's chat about that a bit.
So I did look into this a little bit, and of course you get online and it's divisive, like a lot of other things in our country. It seemed to me that people were generally, the closest consensus I could get was that if it's popular music, then it's considered pop now. That's kind of how people think about it. Now, I have to say, living in New York City, that you have to be careful who you call pop because it can be an insult. Like I let slip with this woman who has an alternative rock band. I was like, oh, it sounds a little pop. That did not go over well, I will tell you. So you have to be careful who you give this label to. But for me, that's how I see it. So it could be international. There are some people considered rap pop blends, for example, and country pop blends. And so I think it's a pretty broad category, in my opinion, at least.
I think, one of the bands I think of is Cat's Eye. It's sort of like, the story of how they came together was horrifying because of the reality show component and what it put teenage girls through, which further feeds into the Gen Z internal displacement narrative and how that entire show's premise kind of ate into that in the worst way possible. But apart from that, the idea of 6 girls from completely different backgrounds with an international audience coming together to sing songs that would make people feel like they can break into a dance and like that are catchy and have a certain virality to them. Like you hear Gabriella and it's just running like a Eurovoom endlessly in your head. And so I think there is something to be said about a certain component of virality where it's like, it's just easy, repetitious, and it stays on the radio for a reason for as long as it does, and it plays with the prevalence that it plays. But I think it's because of pop girlies being sort of influential in their own way of dressing, the style they bring, their own personas, all those things imprint on the generation, on the Gen Z girls. And I think that needs to be paid attention to, both in the positive and the negative. And I'll focus on the positive because I really loved when Cat's Eye was integrated into the Gap commercial. I don't know if you guys saw that. And it came right after American Jeans. American Eagle, and like their ad was so heinous and they doubled down on it and did not like stir from the narrative that it was clearly creating. And I don't know if for those who don't know the American Eagle campaign, it was all around having good genes, but GENES. And so it was all around eugenics, which like they tried to skirt away from, but it was not at all how it was playing out for them. And so then Gap just responding without any like backlash as a brand, but just showing that Cat's Eye diversity and then having the entire ad cast with nothing but diversity was such a strong response, and the music was so great and the dance sequence was stunning. And the choreographer who did that dance sequence, like he's just incredibly talented, but again, he is also LGBTQ. So like he's also bringing diversity into it. So it was just done without effort, right? Like it was done like without having to be overt about it and make it about like a quota or a statement, to just be like, this is reality, this is life, this is how we celebrate life, this is what our customer base looks like. Just make it self-evident. And I think that's what pop culture can be about, and it can do. And I think pop girlies can empower that kind of, I can't imagine the number of posts I saw on TikTok right after that where girls were like, we're going to finally buy Gap, and Gen Z wasn't into Gap at that point. But seeing that particular commercial revitalized that brand completely. So I think there's many ways in which music and this culture around it can truly be leveraged to really foster what it means to be human in today's world and to bring about the very belonging that is seeming to be missing in all these desirous lyrics, where they feel kind of at odds within the context they should be feeling fostered and nourished by. So, yeah.
I think that there's a really powerful role for musicians in society, and I am super excited when women are at the top of those charts. As a feminist, I have a lot of male artists that I really am a fangirl about, but there's something about some of the agency that we see coming out through some of these artists, and having women be successful, and also the change in the way the record industry. See how old I am? I know about records. In the music industry, from the way in which there are so many amazing talents in the Motown movement, like some of the most iconic music ever, but people were not able in the various circumstances, both then and subsequently, to really have control over their music and to have the real fortune that those songs made go to them versus to producers. I mean, I remember, now I'm going to date myself again, when Prince stopped using his name and used the symbol in order to get away from a really usurious contract that was damaging his creative, potential and his desire, and was really taking advantage of his talent to enrich other people. And so when I see, the success of Taylor Swift, like how she has been able to take on some of these hegemonies, is that the word? Some of these powerful entities in the ticket industry, for example, and get control of that concert process, not just for her own self-enrichment, but of course it enriches her in a way that if you're stuck in that system, you're just basically making money for a lot of other people who aren't necessarily doing anything. Some people are, to be fair, but like the ticket price, the ticket price as you see when you go to a concert, how much of that goes to the artist versus these big companies that have such a control over the venues, and like it really is inspiring. And so I do think that there's a power in women artists that is really shining now through this Gen Z time, through Gen Z and in this time period. And I also think there are amazing artists, male artists, and artists, that transcend gender, or trans artists who really have, lyrics and music that really appeals broadly. So I don't think there's like male music or female music. I think that there's just amazing creativity happening and boundary pressing, which I really appreciate. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that one of the songs that I use to relax in the midst of the battles that I'm in my work, I'm a Swiftie, I confess. It's Taylor Swift. It's Shake It Off. Always helps me shake it off. I think she's amazing. And also, I know this is a theme for me, Trump's disdain for her just makes me like her more. That's true.
Thank you, Lisa. I think Taylor Swift's a great example here. Ty kind of talked about earlier this idea of it being a large umbrella for pop music. And I think if you look back at Taylor Swift's history as a musician, she started out really as a country artist. And then you had this development into alternative music. You hit COVID during the pandemic. She kind of redefines herself with Evermore and folklore. Yeah. She gets more like folky albums. And now she's back into full like almost techno pop at times. And so I think this idea of labeling is really interesting. Lisa, I want to go back over to something you said earlier. You briefly mentioned one of Olivia Rodrigo's songs talking about it being protest music towards the patriarchy. I want to talk about a little bit about politicization of music. This has been a large concept throughout musical history. You look at the HIV/AIDS crisis and all these ballads that come out of this talking about the pain and struggle of that. You look at the Vietnam era war, these protests happening about students being so appalled by this. You see violence from that and music in response to that. I'm curious, but especially to Lisa's because of her background in politics, but also to the whole panel. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see protest music occurring now? Does it look the same way as it did? Or has it developed into more pointed things towards certain individuals or certain groups?
Well, I will start. Thank you for that invitation. I think that it's impossible to separate the tradition of protest music from music. But not all music is protest music. It's like, what is that Venn diagram, right? I'm not going to say it. I do feel like talking about music is a little bit like describing the taste of an orange to you without tasting it. But I think there's so many amazing songs of protest over time that have really captured people's hearts, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Ohio. I wonder what will be the music that comes out of Minneapolis. Obviously, we have Bruce Springsteen with The Streets of Minneapolis taking on the streets of Philadelphia from that movie about AIDS to bring it into this current moment. And so there are lots of ways in which artists are repurposing music. We saw that way back in the day when Elton John repurposed his Candle in the Wind from Marilyn Monroe to describe and make a tribute to Princess Diana in her untimely passing. But I think protest music is something that is both of the moment and timeless. And so now I do get a chance to share my other right-hand side of the list, which is not Gen Z, but is my playlist of protests, just real quickly, in case you, not that you're going to write it down, but it'll be on YouTube. Sharon Jones and the Daptones, she has a version of This Land Is Your Land. She's passed away in recent years. It is amazing. It is an old song from way back that she takes on and really is so empowering, making, about, this is our land. And it takes on that early Guthrie song and really makes it present. I stop whenever Nancy Sinatra's These Boots Were Made for Walking is on, because it talks about liars and how we're going to get them, and that's part of my job is exposing the liars. Whenever something really terrible happens in the world, political violence, for example, I play I Only Have Eyes for You by the Flamingos, because it takes me out of watching the news into really appreciating the people I love and really looking at them and sharing that love for them in these moments that are so hard. Natalie Merchant has a version of Which Side Are You On, the great labor song from Florence Reese, about whose side are you on? This fight is happening. And as one of my favorite authors, the historian Howard Zinn, wrote a book called You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train. And this train is moving. Whose side are you on in defense of humanity and freedom and equality? Obviously, the other long-standing war protest songs, Give Peace a Chance and War. You know the lyric, what is it good for? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Say it again, right? I can't sing. I confess that I once did karaoke and people stopped eating mid-sentence. But I love music, even though I can't sing. And by the way, when I told my husband that this happened at karaoke, he said, I know. And I said, but I sing in the car all the time. And he said, I know. And I said, how come you didn't tell me? And he said, I told you don't quit your day job. And I said, I know. I didn't know I was terrible. And he was like, you are terrible. But last one on my list, there's a song by Reese Palmer. She's a black singer who is in the country genre. So she's, a path breaker over there, along with a lot of other really great singers who've crossed over. Lil Nas, Beyonce's album. There's a lot happening. But Reese Palmer has a song called Seeds that she wrote after the murder of Trayvon Martin. And it's about how, if they take you down like seeds, we're going to spread and grow more flowers of resistance. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried and then I meandered, and I hope it was all right.
I think enough. Ty, Astor, do you have any thoughts on this idea?
Go for it.
And please, if you're a Gen Z person and I get this wrong, please tell me afterwards. I'm really open to that. It seems to me there's less maybe just direct political commentary that happens through music as far as protest music goes. But my take would be is that maybe it's more subversive and maybe even a little more subtle now. It seems to me a lot of the Gen Z pop girly music that takes a political stance or social stance happens through the lens of the individual. So the first song you listen to, Good Luck Babe, for example, that's a song about Chappell Roan having a huge crush and being infatuated with another woman, and the woman being infatuated with her, but denying her desire for Chappell. That's why she's so agitated in that song, okay? That's a really clever way to go about making a social statement or a political statement. You wouldn't necessarily know it, but if you really get in there, that's what that song's about. One of my absolute favorite song right now is Rosalia, Berghain. And I didn't have us do it here because the outro is a little aggressive. But that song, she starts with opera. She sings in, I think, 3 different languages or 4 different languages in that song. Bjork makes a surprise visit during the bridge as a small bird. And then there's Yves Tumor, who's a rapper, who takes us to the end with an old Mike Tyson line. And the song is really about religion and the place of religion in modernity. And how do we think about forgiveness, for example, and self-forgiveness and forgiving others? It's a really deep, I think, subtle song in a lot of ways. And if you are willing to, and this is one of the great things now about music, right, is that if you get obsessed with a song and you want to go down a rabbit hole, there's ample avenues for you to do that through social media or YouTube or whatever else. So I think it happens, but to me it happens in a way that's, I think, a lot, in some ways, more clever and more subtle.
I would say that I like a couple of songs, like Paris Paloma's Labor is something that resonated deeply with me when it came out. I don't know if you guys know Aurora's The Seed. That's another song that like focuses on ecological endangerment and, you know, that we are valuing money at the cost of living trees, living things. And a lot of these things get famous partly because they get played on Reels and on TikTok, right? And so since they're background music, that goes viral as content and then people get to know about it. But it also gets meaningful content, like the words, those lyrics have significance. And I think when it's owned by those it resonates with, it becomes a part of that cultural like meme moment where you feel like it also speaks your truth, your voice into existence. And you get to see this real uprising of community around a single framing, which is a wonderful outcome of social media. Social media doesn't get a lot of praise, but I think that's a beautiful thing to be able to witness in real time. And then the other thing I'd say is like, you know, Harry Styles, like just his like entire gender fluid, I will not apologize for whatever it is that I feel like doing on any given day attitude. Like that's pretty prevalent, like even in Billie Eilish, like in any one of these like pop stars who are in that Gen Z milieu, tend to take complete authorship of their identity, right? And they are going through it. They are always in the process of unfolding, unfurling, but they own it utterly every step of the way. And so it doesn't, in a climate where labels are utilized to polarize people, to cause division, to cause derision, to truly just say, I am going to be this and I'm not going to give you that complete black and white. I'm not going to let you take away my ambiguity, because why not be in the gray area? And that is the beauty of life, but being in that complexity, in that nuance. And I think Gen Z culture, like all of the pop icons, inhabit that space of being ambiguous beautifully. And they don't apologize for it, which I think previously we all felt the need to fit into what was normative and socially acceptable more. So we were more apologetic, less likely to talk about, you know, a relationship where it would be same-sex couple, lyrics being self-evident. If you understood my personal story, you would know that's what it's about. Like that wouldn't even be suggested because we'd be afraid of it, right? And now I think there's just this more intrepid ownership of this is who I am in this moment. It may not be who I am tomorrow, but I'm going to own this in this second. And you can see that even in Taylor Swift's like narrative arc. Every album, she owns it. Like that's her story. You can either be along for the ride or, you know, don't be in my story narrative arc. Like it doesn't matter to me. And I think that is what is beautiful to witness at this moment in time in the pop culture. Like I think it's not talked about enough and people just dismiss it as being like frivolous, but it's not. It's actually a beautiful sense of like, it's okay to be just who you are and it's okay to be different.
Wow, I just want to say that was beautifully put. Thank you so much. And now I feel compelled to tell you that one of my secret favorite songs is Watermelon Sugar. Yes. It's not a protest song, but Harry Styles rocks. And you're right, it's just an embrace of who he is, no judgment, just love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a question out from here. Along with the politicization of music, can y'all talk about the technization, so making like tech, of the music industry, especially how it's controlled by the same tech billionaires that are largely responsible for the climate crisis, I believe it says, is being, do you think they're being manipulated by them?
I thought you were going to go to AI. So my brain was headed toward AI and the real threat that AI poses for musicians. We've just seen in the past year how many people's music has basically been ripped off to create videos so that you can be like, do this in the style of that. And then those videos go viral. And so there's an enormous amount of money being made on the backs of artists, whether they're musicians or actors and the like, writers, as well, that are being fed into this AI machine, and that AI machine is largely not compatible with having a healthy environment in the world, and that's because that AI, those AI systems use so much water, and water is the resource that is I think going to be the source of more wars in the 21st century because it's not finite. We have weather, but we have climate change happening in a way that is undeniable. And now we have this creation across, just to speak to the US part, massive data centers, buildings of sizes that you just can't even imagine unless you actually see them in person, being erected in, Arizona, where water is scarce, being erected in outside Duluth in northern Minnesota, where water isn't scarce, but that's helpful to the whole system of aquifers to have water accessible. And you have these AI companies basically buying off Republican and Democratic city and county council members or board members to sign off on these projects. And to what end? To basically fuel this AI revolution unconstrained by regulation that is genuinely enriching the billionaires more and more at our expense, both the expense of the artists who are being deprived of their revenue based on the way the AI model consumes content and then uses other people's creativity to generate new creativity, but without any compensation to the original artists, but also this enormous threat to our natural resources. The amount of energy that those entities consume is almost unfathomable in terms of the water, but then also the electricity usage at a time in which we desperately need to contain the amount of electricity that is fueling the fossil fuel burning that is burning our planet. So I guess that's my response. It's sort of on point, but I think relevant to the conversation because when you look at the economy, so just one last point on that, when you look at the economy, my friend Anat Shenker-Asaro says, never call it that. It's an economy of choices. The economy makes it sound like it's a mountain. It just happens. Who knew? Why? How did this happen? It's an economy that is the product of choices predominantly by the disproportionate influence of billionaires on our public policy. And when you look at the stock market, everything in the country is being staggered by this administration, by the tariff craziness and madness, by the terrible policies, the cutting off of funds for public schools and for public institutions and the like. The one thing that is holding this economy up is the overinflation of the expectations of huge gain from that AI model from tech. And those tech billionaires, for the most part, many of them, Peter Thiel specifically, do not give a damn about democracy. But they are using data mining, using AI to get into our governmental systems, to get information about us, about the ordinary people, and also to just get unfathomably wealthy when they're already enormously wealthy. So I guess that's what I would say. Ty?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up AI. There was a really infuriating story about a country artist. You might have seen the story about this. Bad actors cloned her voice, which is pretty easy to do now. Reproduced her songs in a little bit of a different way, and then had the audacity to copyright those songs. The artist could no longer copyright those songs now because she had lost total intellectual control over her own voice and also of those songs she had worked so hard to build. This wasn't a Taylor Swift type who could absorb that kind of financial hit or that loss of time. And this is just an early kind of canary in the coal mine story of what could come. The platforms, YouTube, Spotify, sounds like entirely unhelpful for quite some period of time until public sentiment grew so strong that they had to act. I think for me personally, and maybe for all of us personally, all of us know what's happening right now. All of us know that and I stream music, so I'm not holier than anybody else, but we all know it's bad for most artists. We know the AI companies don't care about the individual small artists. And, for whatever small steps I guess I can take or you can take when possible, I think it's really important, actually, to go to you have great local venues here in Boulder to see upstart artists. Whenever you can buy on, directly from the artist. If you can afford it, please make the extra effort to do that. And we are really at this crazy time right now where we're on the fringe of something that could be very bad for musical creativity. All this wonderful stuff that we're talking about up here could be really hard for people to produce and make a living off of.
So I'll present a counter. I completely agree with everything you guys said, but I'll also say that So there was this entity called AI Feelings. I don't know if you guys know of this Instagram account, TikTok account, but they put out a DMX song, X Gon Give It To You, but they did it in a blues gospel take that was an AI ripoff, but it was actually phenomenal. And I was like quite addicted to it when it came out. But the thing is, yes, it definitely needs to kick back royalties because essentially you're doing a cover, and if you are going in that direction, always compensate back to the artist. But what would be an interesting market signal is to see that we went from blues, gospel, like from gospel blues, R&B, rap, right? And now we're seeing people wanting to hear the R&B rap as blues gospel music. And so maybe it's also an interesting point of market feedback to discern like, hey, if people are using AI to say, this is what I want now, maybe the artists can take that as a feedback loop and see, hey, I can go create. Because I don't think, okay, so like if you listen to AI Feelings, like if you listen to that DMX song, you're like, oh, this is epic, I love it. But if you listen to 5 more songs in that entire like Instagram post reel thing, you'd be like, I'm bored because it's so repetitive. And that's the thing, it lacks human ingenuity. And you can tell like anything written by AI, created by AI, it falls flat of what human creativity is capable of. So I don't know, as an artist myself, I don't ever feel threatened by AI. I'm like, bring it on, like I can do 10 times better because this is great feedback loops for me to build off of. Having said that, yes, definitely royalties, being infringed upon, plagiarized, all those things do need to get addressed legally. But I think AI can actually push us to be more innovative and can actually give us opportunities where those who couldn't have previously taken any stab at being creative are getting a chance to play with it, which is also a beautiful thing to see. Yeah, I think everything, like we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like we need, as a freaking species, learn modulation and balance. It's not impossible to find a halfway point, to find a way to like do both things in a way that is measured. But we don't seem to have that sense of discipline or awareness that we want to bring in to rein something that is currently completely running rogue and at the expense of the collective. AI can serve us. It can be enormously beneficial if it's done well, and it can be. It just isn't right now. And I think for that, we need to hold it accountable and hold the billionaires accountable.
Thank you, Asher. I couldn't agree more. Backpacking off you a bit, as I briefly mentioned, I am a professional musician doing this full-time, teaching in academia, working in this industry. And I want to talk about what you were saying. You also basically just said what I was going to say, but I want to pull off this. AI-generated music lacks the humanity. And I think what we keep coming back to is this idea of humanity in music. Protest music's coming back to humanity. What are we experiencing? The pop girlies, they're experiencing what's happening with the COVID pandemic, with everything that's happening after that. The patriarchy, there's so many layers to this that really impact things that make it human. And AI doesn't have that, you know. Okay, I have a few more questions from the audience that I think will be great because we're running close to time. We have about 12, 13 minutes left.
One second.
Please.
One quick statement I'd add is Seth is sitting in the back there. He was in the panel with me previously, and he does use LLMs to produce music. So like, I do think a human being leveraging AI to create something extraordinary is also, it's a tool, you know, and I think it can be utilized. So you can't blame a tool for it not doing the right thing in the world. It's us ultimately utilizing any of these tools very poorly. So yeah, we have to take responsibility.
Okay, I'm going to read 2 separate questions that kind of live together. First off, it often feels like pop music, especially by female artists, and a lot of pop culture in general, is often looked down upon or discredited as superficial or fluff by much of society. Why do you think that is? And do you see that changing as Gen Z artists touch on heavier themes? In the same vein, a little more narrow focused, why do people hate pop girlies so much? Feminists, overall hate, and cancel culture. Just a few thoughts there for the panel.
I mean, I think it's an interesting tension they walk, okay? Because to be popular, you have to somehow pander to what is mainstream. And what is mainstream is what most people are protesting against. And so they walk that fine tightrope of what is my individuality, but is what is also going to be commercially successful. And they do it profoundly well, which is why they get so much hate, right? They're able to monetize it and they're able to get their brand out there. But it doesn't mean that they are not able to bring true substance within that framing. It's again, like, I think we live in a time where we flatten narratives, where we make complex things super simple, super binary, so we can point at it and be like, this is right, that is wrong, I hate this, I like that. That's not reality, that's not the world, and I don't think anybody, not even a pop girly, is that flat. Like, no one is flat, you know? And the beauty of being human is that you're this embodied experience that is so layered, and it, like he said, like, you've gone through these life experiences that are unique to you, and it might be collective experiences like that we all went through COVID, but my specific enduring of that is probably significantly different than anyone else's. And so if I were to sing about it and create an album about COVID, it would be exponentially different than him doing it, you know? And so I think like our specific lens has value add that people dismiss, and then they want to take out the most banal, generalized stereotypes out of each human being and then castigate that. So that's a very simple thing to do, but only a simple mind would want to do it, right? Like, if you actually want to be a real living person who is capable of understanding yourself in a complex manner, you're able to perceive the world in the same capacity. So I think it's simple people who want to make everything simple so that it's easy to love or hate it.
I love all that, Asher, and made me think. I like women's basketball a lot, so I was just watching the tournament, and one of the things I like are the press conferences, and just the sexist questions you hear from some of the male reporters are unbelievable. We're in 2026. And one of the things I've really liked from some of the coaches and some of the athletes is they just say in a very calm voice, would you ask a male athlete that same question? I love that question. Instantly, it shows how dumb the question was and the double standard, right, that we still propagate. And I think it goes to some of the stuff that Asher was talking about. You know, I think one of the advantages maybe now, too, for pop girlies is that we get to know them in a different kind of way if we want to. So you could listen to an hour-long or 2-hour-long podcast. I just heard a 2-hour-long podcast a few weeks ago with Ariana Grande. I have to admit I went into that with not great stereotypes. And to listen to her speak with such depth and intelligence and feeling and genuineness for 2 hours straight completely changed my view of her and also of her music. I felt a little embarrassed about my assumptions going into it, but what a cool, thing to have the advantage to do. We can do that with a lot of people now, and I think it's neat. You have other stories that we're not going to have the chance to talk about today. People like Olivia Dean, who really had to work their ass off to get to where they're at, and when you hear them speak about their music, it's so interesting and intellectually rich. You would have to be so sexist to come out of that and think that this is an awesome person with incredible depth, and that depth is reflected in their music. So sometimes I get overwhelmed by the amount of information available, but in this regard, I think it's actually a really cool era we're living in, that we can know our artists, especially our female artists, in this degree of depth.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is actually amazing. As much as I rail on the advent of this new AI component, just prior to that, the ubiquity of opportunity to learn about people, about music, about their lives in this period, it's extraordinary. In some ways, the internet, has done this amazing thing in terms of connecting us with each other. And then the tech lords have tried to basically take that inherent interest in other people and monetize it in a way that I, have described some of the algorithms for Facebook as the heroine of hate. But in the musical world, in general, what the algorithms are feeding you more music like you like. Unfortunately, in the political arena, the algorithms are feeding you more things that make you mad, that keep you on the platform, that keep their ad revenues coming. In terms of the sort of musical component of the hate for pop artists or something, I think it's sort of like an elitist judgmental thing, like, why hate on it? Just, if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, right? That music may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it is an expression of that artist's view of the world and the music and the sounds that they want to share. And it resonates with a lot of people. I do think that there is a persistent challenge in terms of the representation of women in the media and the sexualization of women or images of women, and the pressure on girls and young women these days in terms of the physical appearance, what is the standard of beauty, or what is the, claimed standard of beauty, especially in this era of the swiping left or swiping right and that instant judgment. It's got to be enormous. And I say that as someone who, a long time ago when I was playing basketball in high school, washed and curled my hair before basketball practice. I don't know what I was thinking. Played basketball and then washed and curled my hair again for school. Like, vanity is not, or that fear of how people perceive you is not new to this generation. It is a persistent thing, particularly for women, and including both, perceptions of potential romantic partners, men or women, and also of, peers, how a peer might judge you, whether you fit in or not. And so I do think that there are people who have done some critiques about some, a whole, basically rap music, pop music, like you could just choose your venue, and criticize it in terms of the lyrics or the sexualization of the lyric, or of the sexualization of women in particular, or the disregard or disrespect for them. That's, been happening for a long time. But I think that what I see in this generation, or these generations of young women as artists is a real attempt to own their own sexuality and own their lives and own their destinies, and I applaud that wholeheartedly.
I think also the other interesting thing I've noticed is, like with Doichi or with Iniko, you can actually go on their YouTubes and follow their creative process. Like, before they get into making a song, they actually live stream and talk to their audience and poll ideas and brainstorm how they're going to move the direction of the song. So that, like, inviting people into the creative process also makes you have a direct audience connection and helps you sell your concerts out directly. So I think there's more like direct to consumer alliances being created with artists having conversation through social media, which previously I think might have gone through traditional routes. So like Taylor Swift stepping out has allowed many people to take their own conduits to step out.
We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get one more question to you guys. Ty touched on this, but it does seem that many modern protest songs are individually focused. Compare that to anti-war songs from Green Day or Creedence Clearwater Revival. Are songs these days less focused on being anti-Trump and more focused in opposing the forces that led to Trump? Are we just more atomized? Atomized, thank you. That's the word. Appreciate it.
That's a really interesting question. This would be my opinion off the top of my head. I think you can accomplish the same thing through the individual route. When you hear a song and it strikes you in the core, like it hits you right deep, and you think, yes, that's me, yes, that's my experience, it's undeniable. And if you have the pleasure of being in a concert with other people who get hit in that same deep way by that message, I mean, it's one of those rare modern moments where you feel this unity among people. And I think that can be a really powerful kind of force. It's just a starting point, though, right? There's no instructions along with that. But in an age where things are so atomized, where things are so fragmented, I think one of the things that pop music really does well right now is it can help bind us together with things that kind of elude or escape or transcend some of these other divisions that we typically have.
I would add to that and say that I think in this generation, because of technology, we are in self-exile. There is a lot of isolation, and loneliness seems to be like, I mean, WHO was just in Davos, and we had a whole panel on this. Loneliness kills as much as obesity and smoking does now. So it is considered an epidemic by World Health Organization. So it's interesting to me that, like, we are at a time where this hyper-focus on the individual exists, but out of that can emerge collective consciousness, right? Like, as he says, but not just because it resonates with each individual and together that creates the aggregate impact, but also maybe we've been at that point where we were so kumbaya and went all outside in, and maybe now it's time to go inside out and do that inner work, claim ourselves, and look within. Because it's very easy to keep looking outward and say these systems need to be fixed, but if we don't fix our inner landscapes, then nothing outside is actually shifting. And I think a lot of these hyper-individualistic focal points through every cultural conduit is asking for that inner calibration to occur.
You know, I think about the question in part as a reflection of the impatience of society, and myself included. Like, where's that instant protest song that defines everything right now, that hits everyone, and that was created by a pop artist? I actually suspect that there's a lot of music that's being created right now that we just haven't heard, that may have all sorts of resonances in terms of protest or opposing particular policies or trying to envision a better world. And it just takes a while to percolate up. I was going to look up, like, when did John Lennon sing the song Give Peace a Chance? I'm pretty sure the war was pretty far along before that happened. And then I'm pretty sure that song was probably played, in a smaller venue before it sort of made it big. And so I think we'll see. We'll see more music coming in these coming months, this year, into next year, the year after that, about a real desire for connection and change. And not every artist is going to do it, and not every song is going to do it. But given the creativity we've seen at the No Kings protest, the amazing signs, the art, the creativity in all these different venues, I imagine that we're going to just see a surge, like a bumper crop of amazing songs to bring us all together, or bring people together in our unity, and in opposition to certain things, or in unity in favor of making the world a better place.
Well, thank you all for your time today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today, but I'm sure the panelists will be around for questions. Thank you all.